My husband said it was a men's trip. I found couple tickets under his name and her name, and sent proof to his boss. In 24 hours, I froze the joint accounts. By the time their cruise docked, my phone was exploding with urgent calls from his boss, lawyers, and family. And that was just the beginning. I never imagined it would come to this. The house had been quiet for days, as if it too sensed the tension growing between Atlas and me. We had built everything together, or at least that's what I had believed. The paint on the walls, the furniture arranged just so, the small things that made it ours. But lately, something felt off. The soft hum of the refrigerator, that once comforted me now, felt like a hollow reminder of what I'd lost. The change had been subtle at first, an extra hour at work here, a weekend trip there. I tried to convince myself it was just stress. Or the long hours that came with the new contract Atlas had mentioned so many times. But then things started to shift. His phone, which had always been something we shared without a second thought, suddenly became a fortress. He changed the lock screen twice in a week. He kept his phone face down whenever we were together. That wasn't Atlas. That wasn't the man I knew. It wasn't just the phone. It was everything. The way he started smelling different, like some foreign cologne I'd never picked out for him. The way he'd speak so carefully, almost too carefully, like he was rehearsing lines. Then, there was the trip. I had asked him about it casually, of course. A men's trip to the Florida Keys. It made sense, I guess. But something about the way he said it, the eagerness in his voice, didn't sit right with me. It sounded rehearsed. Like he was trying to sell me a story. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. The next morning, I noticed something else, something that I hadn't expected to find. I opened our shared Google Calendar. A habit we'd developed over the years, to see what he'd scheduled for the trip. Instead of the usual vague entries, I found blank spaces, where there shouldn't have been any. Site reviews were marked as internal sync. Meetings with clients were now nothing more than empty blocks. Atlas had never been the one to care about keeping things secret. But now, his life was a carefully edited version of reality, one that I didn't recognize. That was when the small voice inside me, the one I'd been ignoring, began to scream. It wasn't just the work hours, or the cologne, or the phone. It was everything. He was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. I could have just asked him. I could have confronted him in that moment. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. I needed more proof, more clarity. The truth wasn't something I was going to take from him, until I had it in my hands, fully formed, undeniable. I wasn't going to let him twist the story to his liking. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about reclaiming the part of me I had almost lost in this marriage. Later that evening, I heard him on the phone in his office. The door was cracked just enough for me to hear his voice, but not enough for him to see me. "We have to be more careful. Riven's sharp. She notices everything." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. It wasn't just the lie. It wasn't just the affair. It was the way he talked about me, as if I were a problem to be avoided. In that moment, the last shred of doubt evaporated. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't crazy. Atlas was hiding something far bigger than I had ever anticipated. And I was going to make sure the truth came out. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, my mind racing as I pieced together everything I had learned. And when I woke up the next morning, I knew exactly what I had to do. Atlas left for his men's trip a few hours later, but by then, I had already begun executing my plan. I wasn't going to let him leave the house without knowing that I had taken control of my life again. The man I thought I knew was gone. And I was ready to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I spent the next day in a daze, trying to focus on anything but Atlas and the mess I knew he was creating. The house was still, too still, like it was waiting for something. Or maybe it was just me who was waiting for the next step, the next clue that would confirm what I already knew deep down. It wasn't until the afternoon that I decided to take the first step. I walked over to the desk in the corner of our living room and pulled open the drawer where we kept our shared documents. The login information to our shared accounts was right there, easy to find, as if it had always been meant to be. I wasn't sure if I was scared or relieved, but either way, I opened the email account that had once been a symbol of trust between us, a place where we'd shared everything. The first email I saw was from an airline. Miami departure. A return date a week later. I squinted at the screen. 2 passengers were listed, Atlas Ward, and the name underneath it made my stomach drop. Sienna Vale. It hit me like a ton of bricks. There it was. The proof I'd been looking for. The ticket. The woman. The confirmation of everything I had feared but couldn't quite bring myself to acknowledge until now. I clicked on the next email, a cruise itinerary for the Bahamas. 7 days. A balcony cabin. 1 queen bed. The words blurred for a moment as my heart pounded in my chest. I stared at the screen for a long time, the words sinking in like heavy stones in my gut. I knew what I had to do. I had to make sure this was final. This was it. There was no going back. Atlas was no longer the man I thought he was. He had crossed a line I would never be able to unsee. I turned the laptop off and closed it with a finality I couldn't explain. As if shutting the lid somehow sealed away the last of my doubts. But it wasn't over yet. The hardest part was just beginning. I had the evidence, but now I needed to act. I opened the drawer where we kept our joint accounts, and for the first time, it didn't feel like an invasion of privacy. It felt like survival. I froze everything, the checking, the savings, every account that had Atlas's name on it. No more running around, hiding behind lies. The man I married was gone, and in his place was someone I barely recognized. By the time Atlas called that evening, I had already taken control. He sounded casual on the phone, like nothing had changed. Like I hadn't just turned his world upside down. He asked if everything was okay, and for the first time in a long time, I heard the nervous edge in his voice. "I'm fine," I said. "I've just been going through some things." I could feel the walls I'd built around myself start to solidify again. Stronger this time. "What?" His voice dropped a little, concerned. But I didn't want to engage. "Not yet. Just handling business," I answered. "Have a good trip, Atlas." I hung up before he could say another word. I wasn't sure what I expected from him, but it certainly wasn't the calm I felt inside myself. I stood there, holding my phone in my hand, listening to the empty space around me. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt something other than fear. I felt ready. The next few hours passed in a blur of phone calls and emails. I had scheduled everything, from contacting his boss to sending out the documentation. I didn't want to wait. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Not the lies, not the betrayal, and certainly not the idea that I would simply sit back and take it. By the time the sun began to set, my phone was already ringing off the hook. His boss, his lawyer, even his mother. They all knew something was happening, but none of them knew the full story. None of them knew the truth I had uncovered in those quiet moments alone. I didn't pick up the phone right away. Instead, I sat in the stillness of the house, feeling something new stirring inside of me. It wasn't anger, not entirely. It was a quiet resolve. The man I had loved, the man I had trusted, had made his choices. And now, I was making mine. This was no longer about Atlas. It was about me. And whatever came next, I was going to face it head on. The calmness I had felt earlier started to feel more like a certainty. Like I had taken the first step towards something bigger. Something that wasn't dependent on him anymore. Something that was mine. The phone rang again. This time, I answered it. The next morning felt like the calm before a storm. The house was still. But it was a different kind of stillness now. Atlas had left for his trip, and I was alone with the weight of what I had done. I felt no regret, only a strange sense of control. I had crossed a line, but it wasn't one I feared. It was the line between living in someone else's lies and finally standing up for myself. I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop, the same table where Atlas and I used to sit and plan our future. Now, it felt like the place where I would plan my escape from everything he had built around me. I opened the email account again, my fingers moving steadily over the keyboard as I started writing. I drafted 2 emails, one to his boss and one to HR. I had gathered the evidence. I had proof of the affair, proof of the lies, and proof of the way Atlas had misused his work resources. The lies he had told about late nights at work. The overtime that never added up. The business trips that were actually romantic getaways. It was all there in black and white, and I wasn't going to sit in silence any longer. I attached everything: screenshots, emails, hotel bookings, even the bank statements, showing his use of our joint account for trips that were never mentioned. My hands didn't shake as I hit send. If anything, I felt strangely calm. It was like I was watching the house of cards Atlas had built crumble, piece by piece, and there was no stopping it now. The silence in the house became louder after that. I closed my laptop and stared at the empty space. I had just launched the first salvo in what would be the end of everything I knew. It felt like the right thing to do. But it also felt like I had opened a door that I couldn't close. What would happen when Atlas returned? How would he react when he found out that I knew everything? The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Jessica. "Hey, you okay?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. She knew something was wrong, even if I hadn't told her the full story yet. "I did it," I said, my voice calm, but there was something else in it too, something that hadn't been there before. "What do you mean, you did it?" she asked, sounding confused. "I froze the accounts. I sent everything to his boss. He's going to find out today." Silence stretched between us. I could hear her taking it in, processing it all. "You froze the accounts?" she asked, as if trying to understand the weight of it. "Yes. I can't keep living like this, Jess. I can't pretend I don't know what's going on. I need him to face what he's done. I need to take control of this, of everything. Jessica didn't respond right away. I could almost hear her weighing my words, searching for the right thing to say. "I'm proud of you," she finally said. "This is hard, but you're doing the right thing." Her words, simple as they were, hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear them. It was one thing to know I had made the right choice. But hearing it from someone else, someone who had been there for me through everything, made it feel real. "I'm scared, Jess," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. "What if this doesn't work? What if I've done all of this, and it only makes things worse?" "It won't," she said confidently. "You've done everything you can to protect yourself. You've taken control of the situation. No matter what happens next, you're going to be okay." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. For the first time in days, I felt like I could actually breathe. "I hope you're right," I murmured, but even as I said it, I knew I had made my decision. There was no going back. We talked for a while longer, but the conversation drifted, and eventually, we said our goodbyes. I spent the rest of the day going through the motions, cleaning, sorting through old papers, trying to distract myself from the storm that was about to break. But the truth was, I knew there was no point in pretending anymore. Atlas would come back, and things would never be the same. As night fell, I sat in the living room, the soft glow of the lamp, casting long shadows on the walls. The silence felt different now, less oppressive and more like a space where I could finally breathe. I had faced the truth, and even though the path ahead was uncertain, I knew I had made the right choice. When Atlas returned, things would change, and I was ready for that change. Atlas was set to return that afternoon, but I didn't feel anxious or scared anymore. In a way, the storm had already broken, and now I was just waiting for the fallout. I had done what needed to be done. The emails had been sent, the accounts frozen, and the truth was out there. The ball was in his court now. What he did with it didn't matter to me. The only thing that mattered was how I moved forward. I heard the sound of the car pulling into the driveway. It wasn't Atlas's usual quiet arrival. The way he used to sneak in late, when he thought I was already asleep. This time, the sound was heavier, the tires crunching on the gravel like they had a purpose. I didn't rush to the door, but I stood up and made my way to the window. I saw his car first, and then, when the door opened, I saw Atlas. He stepped out, looking slightly disoriented, his suitcase rolling behind him. His posture was stiff. His face pinched in a way that told me the weight of everything was already bearing down on him. He didn't see me standing there, but I knew the moment he stepped onto the porch, he would feel the shift in the air, that invisible line that had been drawn between us. I didn't open the door immediately. I wanted him to feel the silence, to know that nothing was the same anymore. The doorbell rang. I didn't move at first. I just stared at the doorknob, feeling the thrum of my heartbeat in my chest. I couldn't ignore the fact that I was standing on the edge of something I had never thought I'd face. I had spent so many years being his wife, believing in the life we had built together. And now here I was, standing on the other side of a door, facing the man who had broken every promise we had made. I took a deep breath and opened it. Atlas stood there, looking at me with those eyes I had once trusted more than anything else. His mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. He was waiting for me to say something, but I wasn't sure what words could come out that wouldn't feel empty. Riven, he started, his voice sounding foreign to me. Can we talk? I stood there, keeping my hand on the door. About what? I asked, my tone calm, almost detached. It wasn't that I didn't care. It was just that I didn't feel the need to unravel the mess he had made any longer. Please, he said, his voice a little firmer now. He was trying to reclaim some power, but it was obvious it was slipping away from him. I need to explain. I shook my head, not because I didn't want to hear it, but because I already knew everything I needed to. Explain what? I asked, my voice steady. The plane tickets, the hotel rooms. Or maybe you want to explain why you were planning a whole life without me. His face fell. The strength he had walked up with melted, and I saw the shame there, creeping in. I didn't mean for things to go this far, he said, the words stumbling out, not quite fitting together. It was a mistake. A mistake, I repeated. No, Atlas. You don't get to call this a mistake. You knew exactly what you were doing every step of the way. Don't pretend this wasn't planned. His eyes flashed with something anger, regret, maybe even fear. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he muttered. But I could see the cracks in his facade. The man who had once seemed so confident, so sure of himself, was unraveling right in front of me, and it felt strangely freeing. You knew, Atlas, I said softly, stepping back, not allowing him to come inside. You knew exactly what you were doing when you started all of this. Don't try to twist it now. He didn't speak for a long time, just standing there, his head hung low, probably wishing for a way out. But I wasn't going to give him that. He had made his choices, and now it was time for him to face them. I reached into the pocket of my coat and pulled out the envelope. I didn't hand it to him right away. Instead, I just held it in my hands, watching the way his gaze flickered to it, his eyes darting back and forth between me and the document. You're not going to get away with this, I said quietly, feeling the weight of the words settle between us. Not this time. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, cutting him off. No more lies, Atlas. You're done. I know everything. I've been watching you break everything we had, and I'm not going to let you do it anymore. His face went pale as he took a step forward, reaching for the envelope. Please, Riven, we can fix this. We can fix us. I stared at him, no longer the woman who had stood by him all those years. No, Atlas. We can't fix this. The finality of my words seemed to hit him harder than anything I had said before. His hand fell to his side, and I could see it now, the reality of what had been lost. Not just our marriage, but the man I thought I knew, and in that moment, I knew it wasn't about fixing things anymore. It was about letting go. I changed the locks, I said softly, the words clear and unflinching. When the ship docks, don't come home. I handed him the envelope, and without waiting for another word, I closed the door between us. It was done. The end of us was final. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and messages. Atlas's absence felt both deafening and relieving. I didn't realize how much of my life had been consumed by the weight of his lies until they were suddenly gone. The silence in the house wasn't heavy anymore. It was like I could finally hear my own thoughts again, feel my own space. But the world outside wasn't as quiet as inside. The moment I stepped out of the house, I could feel the tension in the air. People knew something was wrong. His boss had called twice the morning after, the calls that were filled with more confusion than concern. When I didn't answer, they left a message. It wasn't until the next day that I finally listened to the voicemail. The voice on the other end was cold, corporate. They wanted answers, but I didn't have any more to give. I had already sent all the answers they would need. The truth was out. There was nothing left to hide. I didn't know what to expect when I froze the accounts. It wasn't something I had planned to do until I felt the moment was right. But when I clicked submit and confirmed the freeze, there was no second guessing, no regret. I was done. Done with his lies, done with his betrayal, and done with the man who had torn apart everything I thought we had. But even with all the clarity, there was still this part of me that wasn't fully healed. I didn't expect Atlas to handle things well. Of course, he wouldn't. I was prepared for the fallout, but I didn't expect it to feel so personal. The next time I checked my phone, there were 6 missed calls from him, and a voicemail. His name blinked on the screen, like a reminder of everything I was trying to leave behind. I didn't call back. Instead, I took a moment to sit down at the kitchen table and breathe. The house felt too quiet, but it also felt like a fresh start. I had faced the truth, and now I was moving on. It wasn't going to be easy, but I didn't want it to be. This was a test, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was winning. Hours later, when Atlas finally did reach me, I answered. His voice on the other end of the line sounded thinner, more fragile than I had ever heard it before. Riven, what's going on? I tried using the card, but it's not working. Did you do something to the accounts? His voice wavered, uncertainty seeping through the cracks of his usual calm demeanor. I froze them. I said simply. You don't get to spend any more of my money while you're out there living a lie. I could hear him shift, the shuffle of paper, maybe the sound of his clothes rustling as he tried to collect himself. I don't understand. Why are you doing this? We can still fix this. Please. I felt something in my chest tighten. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness. It was just exhaustion. No, Atlas. There's nothing left to fix. You've made your choices. You don't get to ask for forgiveness now. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle in the space between us. I can't keep pretending. I'm done. There was a long silence. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, he asked, Is this it? Is this how it ends? I closed my eyes, not because I felt bad, but because it was finally over. Yes, Atlas. This is how it ends. I hung up before he could say anything else. The silence in the house was deafening now, but it felt different. It wasn't an oppressive weight anymore. It was my silence. My space. I had made it mine again. And that's when I realized something. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about taking back everything that was stolen from me. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Atlas. It was Jessica, checking in to see how I was holding up. Hey, she said when I answered. How's it going? I let out a breath. It's done. It's over. Good for you, she said, her voice soft but strong. You deserve peace, Nevaeh. You deserve to have your life back. I smiled. Something small but genuine. I think I'm starting to believe that. The days that followed were strange, not because I was devastated, far from it. I was just empty. Not in a bad way, but in a way that was necessary for my healing. Everything I had believed in was broken. But there was still a part of me that knew it wasn't the end of my story. It was just the end of that chapter. I had so much more to write. I couldn't help but think about what had happened to Atlas. He was a ghost in the life I had once built. But now he was just a memory of who I had thought he was. I was no longer tethered to that version of him. And I knew, deep down, I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't waiting for anything from him. He had already given me all the closure I needed. The phone rang again. But this time I didn't feel the need to answer. I was letting go of him, of the past, and stepping into a future where I finally had control. It wasn't until the next morning that I finally heard from him again. The phone buzzed on the table beside me. The name, Atlas, flashing across the screen. I stared at it for a moment, letting the silence fill the space around me. I had almost forgotten what it felt like to hear from him. There was no panic, no rush to answer. It was just another notification, just another lie I didn't have to listen to. But I picked it up anyway, because I knew this conversation was going to be different. "Riven," he said, his voice raw, strained. "I need to talk to you." I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. I already knew what this was about. He was going to beg. He was going to try to explain it all away, as if the truth could be twisted into something that made sense. But it didn't matter anymore. "I'm listening," I said flatly. The words felt heavy in my mouth, but they were the right ones. "I don't know how it all got so messed up," he continued. "I didn't mean for it to get this far. I never meant to hurt you." The words weren't new. They were the same ones I had heard over the years. The same ones he had used to talk himself out of things. But this time, they felt empty. "You didn't mean for it to get this far?" I asked, my voice colder than I had intended. "Atlas, you planned this. Every step of it. Don't pretend it was an accident." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him trying to collect himself. But I wasn't going to let him off the hook this time. Not after everything. "I know," he said quietly, his voice softer now. "I know what I've done. I know it's over. I don't know how to fix this." "Fix this?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "There's nothing to fix, Atlas. What you did can't be undone." "I'm sorry," he said, and for the first time, I believed he meant it. But it was too little, too late. The apology wasn't for me anymore. It was for himself. "I can't keep doing this," I said, feeling the finality of my words. "I can't keep living like this. I'm done." He didn't speak at first, and for a moment, I thought he had given up. But then he said something I wasn't expecting. "Are you sure?" His voice cracked slightly. "You don't have to do this alone, Riven. We can figure this out. We can start over." The offer felt as hollow as the rest of his words. I was done with the promises. I was done with the lies. "I don't need you anymore," I said, each word like a stone falling into place. "I'm not the person you thought I was, Atlas. I'm not waiting for you to fix this. I'm fixing it myself." There was another long pause. And then, finally, he said the words I had been waiting to hear. "I never meant for things to go like this." I thought I could get away with it. I thought you'd never find out. You thought wrong, I replied. And now, you have to live with the consequences. Not me. He didn't respond. I could hear him breathing, the weight of everything pressing down on him, just like it had been pressing down on me for months. But I wasn't the same woman who had stood beside him all those years. I had changed, and I wasn't going back. I'm going to hang up now, I said. Goodbye, Atlas. Riven, please. But I had already ended the call. I put the phone down and stood there for a moment, letting the silence fill the space again. It wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was just quiet. The world outside seemed distant, like everything had slowed down for a moment, giving me the space to breathe. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't waiting for him to fix anything. I had already fixed myself. The truth was, I had already left. I had left months ago, when I started piecing together the lies. I had left when I stopped needing him to be the man I thought he was. I had left when I realized that no amount of apologizing, no amount of begging, was going to change what had happened. I had left when I realized that my life, my real life, was waiting for me on the other side of this. It was done. The door had been closed, and I was stepping forward into whatever came next. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt free. The days that followed were filled with a quiet sense of urgency, but also a calm I hadn't expected. It was like a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had been lifted. I started waking up to a new reality. The mornings were no longer filled with the haze of suspicion, the nagging fear that something was wrong. Now, they were just mine. The house, the space, the time, it all belonged to me again. I knew I couldn't hide from the emotional fallout forever. The phone calls, the texts from people I hadn't heard from in ages, they all started coming in. Some were from Atlas's family, his mother asking if we could talk. Some were from his friends, trying to see if they could reach him, asking if I had heard from him. Some were from colleagues of his, expressing concern, as though they still thought I'd be the one to make things right. But I didn't pick up the phone. Not once. I couldn't be the person they wanted me to be anymore. It wasn't easy. The silence in the house was sometimes deafening. I would walk through the rooms, and I could still see the traces of Atlas everywhere. His clothes in the closet, the books on the shelf, the things that used to fill the space between us. But now, those things felt like remnants of a life that no longer existed. I knew I had to start putting things in their proper place, not just the physical objects, but my emotions too. That's when I started the process of rebuilding. I called a moving company and set up an appointment to clear out the rest of his things. I knew I had to do it, physically and emotionally. I didn't want anything of his left in this house. No more remnants of the man who had betrayed me. The process wasn't as painful as I thought it would be. It was more like cleaning out a drawer you've been avoiding. Sorting through things you don't need anymore. Throwing away what doesn't serve you. The hardest part wasn't removing his things. It was the thought of what I had become while I was with him. I had been so consumed by his actions, by the idea of trying to fix things, that I forgot what it meant to take care of myself. I spent hours that week organizing, not just the house, but my mind. I made lists. I set goals. I started thinking about what I wanted next. What I wanted for me, not for us, or for him, or for anyone else. I made the decision to take some time off from work, just to breathe and gather myself. I needed to rediscover the person I had been before Atlas. The woman who had dreamed of her own path, who didn't have to answer to anyone. It wasn't long before I started to feel the shift inside me. I began saying, no, to things that didn't align with who I was becoming. People who expected me to pick up the pieces of his life. Who thought I'd simply return to the woman I was before this all happened. They didn't understand. I wasn't that person anymore. I couldn't be. The first week after Atlas left, I felt a mix of emotions. There was anger, yes, but it wasn't the rage that I had expected. It was more like the slow burn of something finally ending. And then there was the fear of what would happen next. What was I supposed to do now? But even the fear felt manageable. It wasn't paralyzing anymore. I wasn't holding on to the unknown. I was learning to embrace it. By the second week, I started feeling the first stirrings of excitement. Not because the situation had changed, but because I started researching places to go, things to do, anything that would remind me of the person I used to be before Atlas, before I had let myself be lost in someone else's story. I remembered how much I loved traveling. How I had once wanted to see the world, without any ties holding me back. So, I booked a trip. It wasn't just about running away, it was about running towards something new. Something that was mine to discover, without anyone's expectations hanging over me. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need to. This was something I was doing for myself, and I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Not anymore. As the days passed, I found my confidence coming back in small, steady waves. I started meeting new people, engaging with the world in a way I hadn't allowed myself to in years. And each time I met someone new, it was like I was seeing the world through fresh eyes, free from the cloud Atlas had left behind. One night, I found myself sitting in my new favorite cafe, just enjoying a cup of tea. The old me, the one who had been so consumed by a failing marriage, by a man who had manipulated her every move, felt so far away. I could barely remember what it felt like to feel small and uncertain. This was who I was now. And I was proud of that. I had taken the hardest step, walking away, and everything else had fallen into place. The future was no longer something to fear. It was something I could step into, confident in who I was and who I was becoming. As the sun began to set that evening, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, I realized I wasn't just surviving. I was living again. And for the first time in a long time, I knew that this was just the beginning. The morning of my flight felt surreal. I had spent weeks planning, booking, rebooking, and doubting whether I was making the right decision. But as I stood at the airport, suitcase in hand, waiting to board a plane to a new chapter, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of excitement and calm. This was my fresh start, the beginning of something that was entirely mine. I didn't need anyone else's permission. I didn't need anyone's approval. The sun was just rising, casting soft light across the terminal. It felt symbolic, like the day was as new as I was. A few months ago, I would have never imagined that I would be here, doing something like this. But here I was, about to step onto a plane, leaving behind the wreckage of a life I had built, with someone who never saw me for who I was. I thought about the conversation with Jessica the night before, when she reminded me how much I had grown. She said, "You're walking away, but you're not running. You're stepping into your own life. And that's powerful." Her words echoed in my mind as I checked in for my flight, my heart strangely light. I sat at the gate, watching people around me, each one lost in their own world. Some were glued to their phones, some were reading, and others were just staring ahead, lost in thought. I felt different from them. I wasn't waiting for something to happen. I wasn't waiting for an apology or a sign. I had already decided my path. When I boarded the plane, I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. The seat by the window was mine. No one would sit there beside me. No one would tell me what to do or where to go. For the first time in years, I was the only one who had a say in where I was going. As the plane lifted off, I looked out the window, watching the city shrink beneath me. It felt like I was shedding the past, piece by piece, with every mile that put more distance between me and the life I had known. Atlas, the house, the betrayal, all of it felt distant, like a memory I was slowly letting go of. I wasn't running from it. I was simply walking away, knowing there was nothing left for me there. The journey wasn't just about leaving. It was about embracing who I was becoming. I had been scared of that for so long, too scared to be alone. Too scared to face the world without the person who had once been my everything. But now, I wasn't scared anymore. I had found my strength in the silence, in the space I had created for myself. The plane began its descent, and I felt something stir inside me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Real, raw hope. The kind of hope that doesn't rely on anyone else to make it happen, the kind that grows from within. As I stepped off the plane, I took a deep breath of the new air, feeling it fill my lungs, the weight of the past lifting with each step. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid to face it. I wasn't waiting for life to happen to me anymore. I was making it happen. I spent the next few days exploring, wandering through streets I had never seen before, not caring where I went, just knowing I was free. I went to cafes, visited galleries, even sat on the beach for hours, watching the waves crash against the shore. Each one a reminder that life was always moving forward, no matter what. I met people along the way, some who would stay for a moment, some who would be gone just as quickly. But with each encounter, I was reminded of something I had forgotten in my marriage. I had a story too. I had dreams, desires, and a life that was uniquely mine. I didn't need anyone else to validate it. I was enough. By the time I returned home, I had changed. I wasn't the woman who had been blindsided by betrayal, not anymore. I was someone who had faced the darkest parts of herself, and come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more certain of her own worth. I walked through the front door of my house, the place that had once felt like a prison, and felt something new: peace. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was mine. Every corner, every space, had a story now, a new story that I was writing for myself. I had survived, and now, I was ready to thrive. I opened my laptop, ready to check in on the emails I'd missed while I was away. And then I saw a message from Jessica. "How are you feeling?" she asked. I smiled as I typed my reply, knowing that this time, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. "I'm feeling free," I wrote. I'm feeling like me. And for the first time in a long time, I knew that was enough.